So I keep hearing people say that this American monetary experiment is the first time we've ever had a fiat reserve currency or a credit based reserve currency. And that is just not true, not even remotely true. Smash that like button if you'd like me to continue posting content to help me out with the YouTube algorithm. So, I was a delegate in the presidential election for Ron Paul in 2012 and a community organizer. That whole In the Fed campaign. And back then, nobody even knew what the Fed was. Nobody's talking about the Fed. Now, everybody's talking about how the Fed is blowing up the stock market. And you can give Ron Paul credit for that. That was the whole point of that campaign, for the most part, was just to make awareness of the fiat system. And people know now that America is printing money. But now everybody's saying that this is some brand new thing that's never been tried. And this is Brian Lewis of MMT Investing. And things just changed. So, I mean, if we go back to China, they invented paper, they invented the little stamp paper printer. That's like a little block stamp thing. And they had paper money all the way back in like 600s, and that developed into banks issuing currency. That was a big reserve currency system in China, and they called it flying money because it would just like flit away to like it would just go to zero value. And then in Mongolia, Genghis Khan printed paper money. If you look at Marco Polo talks all about it, how Genghis Khan could print the wealth of his entire empire from his armchair or his throne or whatever. But that was a legit central banking paper money, massive world empire a long time ago. China and Mongolia had paper a long time ago, paper fiat money. And then if you go to the European area, like the Mediterranean, they started getting gold and silver coins that moved to Greece and Rome, and then to Europe. And like Greece has a really long history, especially Athens, of having pure like gold and silver coins. But Rome is famous for inflating the currency, and most of the other countries in the area did the same thing. So if you take the gold or the silver content out of the coins and just replace it with cheap metals, eventually you just have a cheap metal coin. It's a token. It's like a token. And you can make as many of those as you want, and that is fiat. It's just a metal token fiat currency, and tons of countries and empires have done that. It's a very common thing to do. And then if you go through Europe, the last 600 years or so, we had a whole set of countries that mostly had metal, like sound money, as like their main reserve currency. But they also had paper money or inflation. And so like the reserve currencies in Europe have been about 100 years each. And I think the order was Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and then British, and then American. So a weird one, like Spain went and mined so much silver in South America that it made their silver coins act like tokens, and they were super inflationary and lost value. And then if you go to France, like leading up to the French Revolution, it was like Louis the XVI, the 16th, and he they debased the currency. They also had paper money that was backed by property. So like, leading up to the French Revolution, they inflated that paper currency. Napoleon switched back to gold. And the world currency switched to the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. So Britain debased the currency. I mean, they started with gold coins or silver coins, the pound, and then the pound sterling means that they're adding copper to the coins and debasing them. So sterling was silver and copper, and then they had a banks the whole time. They had paper money the whole time, and halfway through their reserve currency run, they centralized all the paper money. And then leading up to World War I, they inflated that paper money and went kind of bankrupt. And the world reserve currency switched over to America. And then America is the kings of printing money. America, the colonies all printed paper money that was property backed, and inflated that. And then during the Revolutionary War, the Continental Congress printed Continentals paper money, and they won the Revolutionary War doing that, but they also destroyed the economy. So that's why George Washington and his buddies, when they drew up the Constitution, said only gold and silver is money in America, and paper money is super illegal in America. And that was the start of America. But then uh, Lincoln printed money, like he printed greenbacks for the Civil War, and then they called those back in. And then America wasn't the world reserve currency when they founded the country and wrote up the Constitution. And then when America switched to being the world reserve currency, we saw the development of the system that we have now. Um, but just the idea that fiat is a new thing, or even that a fiat reserve currency is a new thing, that's just completely wrong. That's not even close. And we've seen what happens. Like, it usually inflates at the end of an empire, and the paper money goes to garbage. But I would like to point out, you can go bankrupt with sound money. Like, with sound money, you physically run out of money. And then with fiat, you can always print more currency units, but you get hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is bankruptcy for a fiat currency. And then a lot of the countries had a little bit of both. So that's what you see. Like, you see them starting to go bankrupt with the sound currency, and then they inflate the other currency. So that is a brief history, I guess, on paper money and fiat currency. It's nothing new. Oh yeah, and actually a good one here. Warren Mosler, the founder, the father, the godfather of modern monetary theory, loves to talk about Pompeii. And Pompeii had tokens also. They had metal coin tokens that were not precious metals, just tokens. It was fiat currency. And they set up a whole monetary system, and it's preserved by the volcano. And that's really old. We've had fiat since way back then, probably before that. So it's nothing new. And I mean, maybe it's an experiment, but it's nothing new. That's for sure. Cheers.